then you'll see us in the zoning.
Okay, we are on the air and it is 4 o'clock, 4:02. So we'll go ahead and get started with the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. We have 3 items on the agenda, including our regular public transit report. City staff has asked if we could move item number 3 up to number 1. I don't have a problem with that if neither of you do, so. And that item would be a discussion regarding the installation of Festival Street bollards on Campus Corner. And something we've discussed in the past a few times, and city staff has an update, I think, and probably some further direction from us to discuss. So, is anybody else coming?
I thought Jeff was coming. He was looking for some numbers that somebody was supposed to give him and they didn't.
Okay.
So
Try
I'm
to
not
go
sure.
slow. As I was telling him earlier, I don't know if you all heard about Scott or not. He had a wreck on his bicycle Friday afternoon going home after a bike to work day.
Oh, wow.
Doing something I think he probably shouldn't have been doing on his bicycle for a man his age. And he wrecked and broke his collarbone.
Oh,
He had surgery Tuesday afternoon, and he's going to be out for a little while. So
is he riding on Robinson in rush hour or something?
Oh,
No,
we
it
just got
actually
out
in
of
the
the
parking
parking
lot.
lot.
Oh, God.
So we said no more bicycling for you.
the joke is that the cameras at Municipal Court might have caught the incident
Okay.
if somebody could find the footage.
You can have training wheels. Put
So he
back
wasn't
on.
hit by somebody, he
Nope.
just had a crash. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I hope Scott's all right and recovers and gets back in the office when he can.
it was ironic because Councilmember Grant was at Bike to Work Day,
Yeah. Be careful
and Scott participated.
biking out there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that update.
Yeah, this kind of stemmed from a telephone call I got from Jeff Stewart with O'Connell's about 2 weeks ago, I guess, asking if we were going to install in June, because I guess that's what we had said once upon a time, that we would install in June and try to be ready for whatever that magic time in August when the students come back. You know, it had honestly kind of fallen off of our radar a little bit. We've had the bollards in our possession for quite a while, but hadn't really thought about engaging with the contractor again to get the bollards installed for us. And
We do have them.
we do have them, yes. And quite honestly, in an email follow-up, Jeff asked a number of questions, and I said, you know what, you probably just need to plan on coming to the meeting Thursday night and ask your questions, because they're questions that I really can't answer. So, you know, we need some guidance on how to answer these questions, so.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, so, you know, this is a presentation you've seen before. I pared it down quite a bit since a lot of the information is old. I just kind of wanted to give bring you back up to speed on where we were. So we'll look at the pilot location, what our preferred bollard type was, but really it's the discussion that needs to happen afterwards and what the next steps are going to be. So again, the starred locations show where that we were planning to have the bollards installed. There were 5 total legs that we were going to install on Asp north of Boyd, on Buchanan north of Boyd, on Asp north of White, and on White east of Buchanan, and Buchanan south of White is where we were talking about installing the bollards. We looked at a number of different bollard types, and we kind of landed on this retractable bollard as the best option for us, because removable bollards, you have to store them. Retractable bollards, they store in the sleeve, so it's a lot cleaner. We think they'll probably be able to be installed, or not installed, raised much quicker than if we had to transport them from an off-site location. So the getting them activated would be much faster. Again, we have the bollards at our office at a North Base, so we're ready to go. We just have to work with Streets to get a contractor on board to do some coring for us to be able to install these. Again, that's a lot of the same things that we talked about. we think that this is a safer option because their bollards are in a slightly larger and deeper hole than the removable ones might be, so there might be less opportunity for bad things to happen with the bollards. If you recall, there were several concerns raised by Campus Corner merchants when we talked about this, last fall?
Even
The fall
back
before
then,
that.
Before fall, yeah, because
Yeah.
we were talking about maybe getting them in before the football season, last
Right,
season started.
Right. Those questions, I don't think were ever really addressed. That's why I invited them to be here tonight, and at least one showed up for us, right? So what we need to determine here is what schedule is it we're trying to meet? What's that magic date that they need to be installed by? There's questions about who will be able to raise and lower the bollards. If that's gonna be our personnel that normally takes care of the traffic control during a game day situation, or I would assume that the police department would have a key so they could lower or raise in the event of an emergency. But I don't know what about the Campus Corner merchants, if they need to have a key, if we would want them to have a key.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll start the schedule. If we're doing it, I would definitely say before football season starts, before school starts again. Like ideally by the end of July, probably be a good possible.
Because the students come back in mid-August, right?
No,
Early
sorority
on.
girls move in, so we would need everything done and completed by July 29.
July 29.
And then who will be able to raise and lower? I would think, yes, our streets, the folks that go out and do that now, close streets down and reopen them, police department, maybe the fire department. And I wouldn't have a problem with the Campus Corner Association having someone that's designated that can do it or has the ability to.
We don't want that responsibility.
Okay. You can rely on the city to do it then and wait for the city to get there and take them down. So that's just more time, I guess. But
So it's not just more time, I mean, it's a liability, because when they don't work, who's responsible? And we
City.
don't want that responsibility.
the city would be responsible. It's our,
City would be responsible, but if I'm out there and I've got the key in my hand and they don't go down,
then we would have our streets person, we'd have the police department and the fire department who could do it as well.
those are all great intentions. Have you ever been to Campus Corner on a game day?
Yeah, I
At
work,
the end?
I work at a bar on Campus Corner.
Okay.
So-
It wouldn't run that smooth.
Well, the police set up right there on Boyd, a whole bunch of them standing around the whole time. The fire department is there, a bunch of them, and our streets people are there too. So if it's something we wanted to do, they have to move the barriers in and they have to move them out. So
So that's another question. So you're gonna have the bollards and the barriers?
that's a question that we kind of got hung up on last time was the intention is that we're using school buses, we're using a police car, we're using those reflective barriers. The bus blocks ADA access into Campus Corner. I sit there and watch it on Buchanan and White.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't look good. So looking at all these other SEC schools in other college towns, in their areas, they have bollards, and I don't see the road closed signs also because what I see on game days is those road closed signs, they funnel all the foot traffic coming from the stadium into people who are trying to get around them, people in wheelchairs and large groups of people. So the idea for me would be that those would not be there. The bollards take the place of those. And they look nicer, they're
What
easier to
about those
remove.
yellow claw looking, I can't,
There's
there's
the
a name.
bollards.
MVBs.
There's yes,
Yeah, but the
those.
bollards, there would be no need for those because the bollards would be there to stop any vehicles trying to go through. That's the intent of it, is that they would take the place. Now, staff before it maybe indicated that it would still have both, and to me, that would defeat the purpose of having them, so.
We still have to provide warning that the road is closed for somebody who's not familiar with what's going on. So I mean, I think we still have an obligation to put up some road closed signs ahead of the bollards. I don't know how we can get away without.
Well, if the bollards are
Bollards.
at Boyd, and Boyd's closed off too, but even if it's not, if it's just an event on Campus Corner, there's bollards there. What, I mean, there's nothing for them to turn into. It's blocked off, so I don't, what warning
Are
would
you
they
talking
need?
about the signs like that are a little, like on?
Like the road close to through traffic sign.
Yes,
Yes, that's
those.
what I'm
I
talking
think those are okay to still put up, cause those are put up like the
So-
one.
Blocking
Because
And blocking
we're, because we're on the
advance.
record, I am gonna have to call on you, but I will, give you some time to talk for sure. Let me recognize Councilmember Schuler since she's had her hand up.
Yeah, so back to the question about like who raises and lowers, I was gonna say I wouldn't feel comfortable with the Camus Corner merchants having access to that. I think it's partly liability, it's our responsibility, to close streets, right? So it should be on us. I wouldn't want anybody else to have the ability to do that. It's our infrastructure. So I'm glad that you don't want that responsibility, because I think that should be ours as the city. And we should be the ones who are giving notice to those things being roads closed. I agree that there's probably some need to warn people, but typically, I mean, people know that's at least around Norman when those streets are going to be closed on for game day. So if there are any other times that we're going to be closing, maybe those would necessitate more. But like the police department puts out their maps on which roads are going to be closed and how traffic is going to be flowing ahead of game days and things like that. So I understand that not everybody sees those things, but I mean I think it's going to be pretty clear that you can't turn down. So, and I would agree too that like the bollards are supposed to take the place of all the barriers and things, right? It's supposed to be the mechanism.
Make it easier for people to walk through
Yeah.
while stopping cars from going through. And
Yeah.
the road closed signs make it hard for people to go through it. And I don't know if they really stop a car if they really wanted to get,
I mean, the way that I would see it is maybe not the road closed right there, but like there's a sign that's like further up on Boyd saying that road closed on this date, kind of like we have like the signs that will go up, or just
It's
saying.
usually off to the side. It's not in the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So like something that's, prior to, I think would be helpful. So just thoughts on.
Councilor
those
Nash.
things.
Like the police department seems like it'd be a natural entity that would bear the responsibility of raising and lowering the bollards, right? Because they're always going to be there for these events anyways. And right now, aren't they kind of there setting up the?
And once they leave, the street starts reopening, basically. And so, but I thought there could be scenarios where Campus Corner businesses want the street to stay closed longer than that, and having the option to do that.
Yeah, the
And
fringe,
so-
those
but,
fringe
yeah.
cases are kind of one of those things that we should build that in whenever the need arises, rather than trying to incorporate everything into one holistic
Yeah.
solution right now.
Okay. Councilor Schuler.
Just to this point, yeah, I think that, I mean, we have a structure for all street closures anyway, so if the merchants would want to keep them open, or close them for longer, or, utilize a street closure for something else that they're doing, then they can communicate with, I think, through the proper channels to make that happen, or kind of give an idea of time frame and all of that kind of stuff. Like there's a process I think that could be worked out
Yeah.
for that.
Okay. Councilmember Grant.
I was going to speak to the install date first. I was going to say the least impactful, so it sounds like before July 29th. Also echoing that I think it should be the city that does the raising and lowering. And I have a question. How does like Norman Music Fest or game day, like what's the usual install, destall? Is that streets?
It's
or-
traffic.
Okay, so I'd like to keep it in the lane of traffic. And if there were issues with it, I'm just curious, like how does fire police handle it
Yeah.
better than the actual people that do it every day?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think the fact that the traffic folks are used to the setup and the takedown, this will just be much more time efficient. cranking them up and lowering them back down than loading them up on a trailer and hauling them back in and
That
out.
was a
And I
question
would
too,
say
yeah.
too, if they had a technical issue, it would be traffic that would understand how to work around it or connect with
Or get
the.
barriers when needed.
Yeah, if the bollards don't go up, we gotta go back to the yard and grab the barriers and bring them out because something stuck or something broke.
Yeah, and same for them having connections with the manufacturer to be like, hey, we have to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Yes, so like you mentioned, the time it takes to come out and put the barriers out and then come back and pick them up and reopen the street, and that's now reduced to a few minutes maybe to pull them up and down. And why I mentioned the police and fire is just because they are there and a bunch of them are there when those events are happening, and
So
so.
they definitely need to know how to get a fire truck in there, or cop cars
Yeah.
in there, or an ambulance in there.
And so I don't know if
Everybody
a
will be trained.
traffic person is posted up at the event waiting for it to
They're
end.
not at the event, but they haven't gone home either. They're usually at our office.
They're ready to go.
Yeah.
And we're not exactly a sprawling metropolis. I think you can get, on game days though, could be different, but, okay, any further on that one? Okay, and then the lowers, we got that one addressed. So did you have some further comments that you wanted to mention?
So it's actually the Campus Corner merchants that actually open and close the street, so that then when the city brings out the stuff, we wait for police direction on when they think it's
Ready?
clear,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yes.
So if the city would like the police to do that, that would be great. That would save on our expenses.
Okay. And so for me, again, the main, I'd like to see what are other cities are doing this, other college towns are doing this. Are they all putting, 2 road closed signs right in front of the bollards and blocking them?
I don't think they are. And that's not the signs I was talking about. Anyway. I was talking about the ones in advance, like.
On
Councilmember
Boyd, like
Schuler
further,
was
as
talking
before you
about.
turn.
Yeah.
So you know not to go any further because the road will be
So
closed.
currently,
The
right
bollards
now-
just replace those barriers.
Currently,
that
right
say
now,
they're
there's
closed.
2 Boyd's closed on game day, right? But then they have so that people can come out of that garage on Asp so there's 2 road closed, big, reflective signs that are at where Asp meets Boyd. So between Louis and Starbucks. And all the foot traffic coming from the stadium then hits that, and people are trying to squeeze around it. People in wheelchairs are trying to find a way around it, and they're squeezed onto the 2 sidewalks on each side. And so the point was, can we make it look nicer? Can we make it easier for people to flow through here while at the same time stopping cars and any vehicles from going through there with something stronger than just a road closed sign? So,
And the spacing of the bollards will allow if
Free flow of
somebody,
people.
an ADA accessible path between the bollards, but not wide enough for a vehicle to go through.
okay. Yes.
So actually, on game days, Boyd is closed from University to.
Jenkins.
Not,
Or
I don't think
to
it's all the way to Jenkins. It's
Dean's Row.
Dean's Row, 2 hours prior to kickoff. They're not allowed there. But I do feel like the road closed signs, like if you're only gonna put the bollards up at Boyd and Asp, then the road closed signs that go up at Boyd and University and Boyd at Dean's Row need to go up,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So, but the street in front of Boyd and Asp is closed 2 hours prior. So, but it's open before that.
Yeah.
So I would
and then
almost,
after, yeah.
and I'm trying to think, they open that up. They open that up sooner than they open.
They opened Boyd pretty much after the game's
Pretty much
over.
right after the game, going one way though.
Probably
Yeah.
within an hour,
I think just going west.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
just
Asp
to get those
usually-
people
and
out.
White and Buchanan usually stay closed.
2
until
hours after
midnight or
the
so.
game.
Yeah.
2
hours
hour-
after- if it's a night game.
We try to open it up 2 hours after the game ends, no matter what time the game is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further comments or questions from you? What further direction can we do it that way without? You said there's other signs and we could have them down on each end and whatnot, but
Right.
okay. Any other direction you would need?
No, we got our answers, I think.
Okay.
I think I have one last
Any-
question.
I think Joe's got a question.
Please.
All right, so This is kind of a specialized install. Not every contractor that we work with does these on a regular basis. And we've never bid something out like this really at length. So just in regards to timing with students coming back at the end of July and all of that, how would you like us to proceed if we have a low bid or no bid in the next few weeks? That could be a challenge and put us beyond
that
that
happens-
construction timeframe.
If that happens, I would say if we cannot do it before August, then we're not gonna do it this year, in my opinion. Yes.
How long does that take? Do you have any idea? The install.
For the install?
Yeah, let's say you get the bid, everything goes fine, and they say it takes 3 days, or, you know what I mean? Does it take, how long does it take?
I have never installed a bollard, so I'm guesstimating here, but I could see this being a, 30-day turnaround at the maximum. The big thing is gonna be getting the concrete, after you get the bollard installed, getting the concrete in, but giving it that cure time.
Well, I
We
think-
don't know if they're able to install 2 to 3 a day or 5 to 7 a day. Again, we don't generally do this work. We haven't done these in the
never done
past. So we're not 100% on the time frame for construction. I can't imagine it being long. I also imagine that we could do it split where we can at least keep some traffic moving, half a road at a time or whatnot. Very similar to how we did our construction, the concrete work in preparation for this last year.
Yeah, I mean, the merchants would probably like to know this intersection is gonna be closed for 2 days, or, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, we're good at that. I think last year, the concrete work we did down there went very smoothly, and we didn't have a lot of kickback. So we'll do the same thing this time, if that's the case.
That would be, unless you have some other to offer, again, would be if we can't get it done by the end of July, that we not do it until maybe till when, I don't know how possible it is to do it during winter, if that's a good time or not, but
Just depends
do
on
it
the weather.
earlier before, doing it during winter break would be good too, if we could, after football season's over, so that would be my recommendation if that's what happens.
Okay.
Okay. Any further final comments? Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing that. I appreciate you coming and to the meeting, and we'll see if we can get them done and before the summer's over. Okay, thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the public transit report. We have Taylor here. We go over this report every month with city staff and get an update on public transit ridership report, and thank you.
Thank you.
Transit ridership on our public transit system, any construction projects we have going on, any future plans. And so we have Taylor here to have that discussion with us this month.
Thank you, Chair and council members. I know we have another agenda item after this, so I'll try to be brief, but we have the memo here. I'll hit a couple of high points on the fleet and vehicle procurement. We're hoping to bring a council item to you next month on accepting a grant. We were awarded last year for 6 cutaway replacements or shuttle bus replacements for the paratransit fleet. That will make the paratransit fleet completely up to date, so we're excited about that if we're able to get it approved and procured. It might take a minute to get them in like we've seen in the past with vehicles, but at least we'll have them on the way. And then skipping to grants on the second page, we're trying to get our feet underneath us with the award of the pantograph chargers for the electric buses, so they can charge en route at the transit center. And we're trying to figure out the best way to go about that, since that's something we haven't done before on the scale of charging infrastructure of the city. So looking into that and trying to keep that moving. And then I think I'll skip to the ridership, and we can talk about any other items you guys are wanting to. But for April this year, we on the fixed route and paratransit side, we had 35,367, and that was compared to just over 30,000 last April, so a little over 5,000 increase from last April to this April. Daily ridership was at 1360 this April. It's about an 11.5% increase from last April. So that's about a little more than 100 people more per day, which is, I think, pretty significant. And then fiscal year to date ridership is at 338,000, and last year it was just at 270. So we're still seeing increase despite the change in the routes that we implemented in October, which, like I've been saying, you usually see a dip with such significant changes, and thankfully we haven't. And the routes seem to be performing fairly well. Once we get to this October, we'll start comparing apples to apples. I know on paper it looks like Main Street lost a lot of ridership, but that was because we did change what routes were going where, and that's shifted, as you can see on the ridership for the others.
So last month had a 11.6% increase compared to April of last year. And so far this fiscal year, we've seen a 25.24% increase in total ridership compared to last year. 25% increase in ridership for public transit sounds like pretty good to me.
And we're I think last year I mentioned that was kind of our first post-COVID year.
Yeah.
And we actually got to the previous high of, or pre-COVID, which is actually the last year OU operated it.
Yeah.
So that was about 330,000 between fixed route and paratransit, and last year we were at 330,000. So I think we're already past that with 2
Already
months to
exceeded
go.
Last year's total ridership.
Right. So we're clipping along pretty good. And ridership isn't everything, but obviously we want to serve as many passengers as we can, the best way we can. And I think
shows
that's
that-
showing
I
through
think-
the ridership.
Yeah, I think it shows people have confidence in using it and are willing to use it and are apparently finding it to be worth using and
Yep.
getting them to where they want to go. So that's great.
And then I'll skip to the Norman On Demand, which is the last attachment in your report. And for that service, we had 2,539 riders in April. And to date, since August, when we started it, we have had 21,771 riders. You might have seen the press release we put out at the beginning of May when we announced that expansion a little bit further west that celebrated the 20th, going over 20,000 with that expansion. So we're pretty proud of that. Ridership per service hour, I think we added that last month and this month, but I've talked about it with fixed route and paratransit before, and we wanted to start including it here. It's at 5.9% for April, and service to date's 5.8. That's pretty good for a service of this design. Obviously, the vehicles are a lot smaller, so you can't fit as many people on there. The fixed route is having like 18 riders per service hour, which is pretty good. But honestly, service of this type, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 riders per service hour. So I think this shows the utilization of microtransit is pretty high, on average for the overall service we're putting out there.
And
And
we
that's on the
have-
second page at the top, sorry.
Is there a breakdown of the Safe Ride? Of how many are students using Safe Ride? What percent of total ridership is that making up?
Yeah, let me follow up with you after this meeting. It's generally, we've talked about it in the past, it's generally about 50% of the ridership is using the,
Safe Ride?
well, are using OU emails.
Okay.
Which is kind of our proxy for OU ridership, even though in general, they're all citizens and residents, right, while they're here. And but yeah, I'll look into that. We can definitely dig into the, during Safe Ride hours, who's getting the fare free, because you are OU affiliate versus non, and in general for the entire service, who's using an OU email address versus not. So we can dig down in those numbers a little bit more.
Councilmember Grant?
I was just curious about like the funding structure for the expansion. Like even if we had more riders, there's not gonna be enough with fares to like cover what we're doing
For fixed route or for Norman On Demand?
on demand.
On demand. Yeah, the fares, sorry, I don't know, that's off the top of my head, but the fares aren't making up a ton of the revenue. It's just a credit back to our account every month on our invoice. But it does count for something, and really, because it's on demand, it kind of serves as a proxy to help with utilization, makes people consolidate the trips, try to be more strategic where we're not being overrun with demand. So the funding breaks down to right now, OU is paying 121,000, and the current contract price with the expansion for this year is 799. That we just brought to council in April before we started it in May 1st when we added that expansion on. So that increased it to 799. So that's where we're at with this current year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that, there was a discussion in finance last week about the on-demand system, the cost to renew it for another year. We had previously decided to go ahead and do it, but then we were presented with a budget and what looked like it was going to need a 600,000 plus subsidy from the general fund. When we had kind of got excited about the fact that the transit fund didn't need a subsidy this year.
Right.
And so I think some of us were under the impression that because we had funded it last year, that it was already in that budget. So a little, I guess, seeing that it might need a subsidy after all in order to continue the on demand, just brought up some discussion about can we afford to, so on and on. And so in our discussion earlier, you had some information about the budget.
Yeah, and I think at last week, I didn't attend in person, but Kim Kaufman mentioned that there might be a slight fund balance to offset the cost.
In the transit fund.
In the transit fund, at least what they're projecting. Yeah, it was a little bit of a miscommunication, misread on the budget there because we use FY23 funds for FY24, and I think the thought was it was reoccurring, but we skipped a year technically. So that's why we brought it to you all in late February, just to get your thoughts and opinions on how we wanted to proceed. So welcome to rediscuss that if you would like. I would say we're getting into a little bit of the final hour here to decide, obviously to notify public and OU of the service that they're providing through us. But
That's what you were saying earlier. It's possible that, yes, it does need a subsidy, but it may be in the 200 range.
I
Three,
think
maybe.
Kim said 3 or 350.
3 or 350, okay.
But I need to. I think we need to circle back around with them
Yes.
to confirm that and make sure that's right.
Yes, and we do have the budget vote coming up in 2 weeks, or not even 2 weeks.
So
a week and a
regardless
half.
of the amount, I think it would require an amendment, is what
Okay.
Anthony
Correct.
was saying last week.
And it does, to clarify, does include the expanded service areas that we asked for, which was the 60,000-ish increase.
Yeah, and it was actually because we didn't get it to you as soon as we thought. Started May 1st instead of, I think it was April 1st, and we actually got it quoted at February 1st, so we just kept taking off a month. Ended up being 39,000 when we brought it to you all in April. And then because we're not bearing the one-time costs of vehicle decals or outfits for waves, the amount for next year, I'm hearing, won't be, may not even be the same. It might be slightly lower.
Okay.
So we're discussing all that with VIA, the operator.
Okay. And then I think what some of the feedback I've heard, at least from residents and riders, is some of them would like for it to operate during the daytime. And what we've talked about is, for the first time ever, we're providing a public transit option on Sundays and late night, which is we never have had before. And so we're kind of, from a budget standpoint, we can do day service and run it at the same time as the fixed routes, but then we don't have the budget to also run late night and Sunday. So
Right.
we're trying to fill as much of the 24-hour period with public transit options, I think, is our goal or intent with that. And that's just a matter of what funding we have to do with right now. And so I don't know if you want to elaborate on that any further, but
Well, yeah, through our many months of discussion about microtransit before we implemented it, I think we started landing on the goal of expanding what we're offering rather than replacing or, try not to overlap as much. Because I feel like in that sense, you're kind of offering the same, not the same service, but complementary service that you could really expand the offering. So we landed at late night service and Sundays, which Sunday service is the number one priority after the route changes for our long range transit plan. So that was, I think, a good move, and people had asked for it. That's why it was the number one priority. Yeah, it is. I think the fact is it is an expensive service to run. Obviously, we're serving 20,000 versus 338 or whatever I just said, thousand.
And we could add probably 2
but
fixed routes with that.
The
budget.
demand is a lot lower in the evenings and theoretically on Sundays maybe a little bit higher, but that's what we're using microtransit to test that market out, if you will. And it was an easy thing to pull the trigger on with that service. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think it's worth discussing. That's why we want to discuss it in February, and wherever you all provide direction, we'll run with, and I can circle back around to finance or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, ideally, one day, I'd love to see 7-day service with fixed routes and an on-demand service of some kind that fills in the gaps during the day and runs at night, and like we have it, but that fills in the gaps where the fixed routes do not go.
Right.
And so ideally, if we had budget, to me, it'd be nice to have both of them running 7 days a week, but we have to make do with the resources we have right now. And Councilmember Grant?
Yeah, I'm supportive of an amendment if we need to make one when it comes to the budget vote. And then I am really curious what next year's cost might be. If it is, I don't know, do you think it could be like $200,000, $300,000 less, or?
I don't know that it'll be that much, but in the amendment will work out where obviously you guys will see how much that is, and I should have it soon, and I'll send that to the finance staff, and they can work out what the amendment would cost ultimately, if there is a fund balance or not. So, yeah, I don't anticipate it being that much because the one-time vehicle acquisition costs weren't that high. In the grand scheme of things, but it did amount to a little bit of money. So,
Yeah.
And then there might be a little bit of, just with anything, labor going up, they may have to pay their drivers a little bit more, and that may offset some of the costs. So,
Okay. I agree with Councilmember Grant. I'm fine with the amendment coming forward on that. Last question I had about public transit was, a few months ago, we did talk about the East Side Library. Councilmember Ball has asked about it, and especially now that we know the Central Library is closed indefinitely, just continuing to think about what options we might have for getting some sort of transit option that goes to the East Side Library branch, as it may be the primary branch for a lot of people for a while. And just even before we knew about the library situation, we had people asking about that. So that's just still something I have on my mind as well.
yeah, if I can, I think I reached out to the East Side Library manager just to see if there was a demand, or what the demand was, right? So are we talking all day? Are we talking maybe once a day, there and back? I wasn't sure, like the Social Security route, once or twice a week. Because like what you just said, Councilmember Holman, we try to do the best with the budget we have, and obviously that will ultimately cost dollars that we'll have to find somewhere to provide whatever the amount of service it is. So I'll circle back around with them to see what that demand could be. For what it's worth, I don't know how much it's worth. I'm not hearing a lot of that on my side. I'm not getting a lot of phone calls or emails to provide that. Maybe folks are going to the west side via the Route 112, getting off there at the Sam's Club. I'm not sure, but.
Okay, Councilor Schuman.
Yeah, mostly just a question related to, has anybody asked you specifically about transit solutions for the proposed entertainment district?
Yeah, it's definitely been talked about, and I think it was strategically set up for whatever goes in up there, that Route 110. goes back and forth on 24th now from the hospital down to Main and then goes over to downtown. So I think it's well positioned to provide service to and from that area, between downtown and then the rest of the city through our other route network. After Route 112 frequency addition, which is proposed in the budget, Route 110 is proposed to increase frequency, so that area could see 30-minute headway if it's approved. And
So,
but then there's also discussions that I've heard, and I don't know a lot about, but internal circulation within the area. So that's probably a separate discussion.
okay, so, on Route 110, what would like, how many stops would you have to extend, and how does that extend out the amount of time that the route will take?
Yeah, Lamar with Embark's here, but since the route's already moving through that area, if we added stops, I think theoretically we could still serve it within an hour. That would be the goal. That was kind of the intention anyways. We'd have to add a couple more stops, don't get me wrong, but I think we could still get it, don't you, Lamar?
Yes.
Now,
So basically,
as traffic gets worse and worse and worse, we probably might have to revisit that.
yeah, so what you're saying is it already kind of runs through that area, there's just no stops that are
There are
located.
some, right, but not as many as probably need to be because there's nothing out there right now.
Okay, and then the, after 112, 110 is the one that goes up to the more frequent, the 30-minute,
That's what's proposed,
proposed
right.
in the go normal.
So yeah, Sunday service, then Route 112, then 110.
Okay, and what do we think the timeline is on all of those? So like, how long will it take for 110 to increase frequency?
Well, I guess that's up to you all with the
Okay.
budget ultimately. I would say we
What's
might
the
be,
budget cost?
so roughly what 112 is costing, which is about 205 to Embark, and then we programmed about 10 or 15,000 for fleet maintenance and fuel. So it's about 220 total.
Okay.
If we wait a few years, obviously that'll probably go up, but that's what we're budgeting for Route 112 is about 220 total.
Okay,
And then eventually we'll get to a point where we're out of buses, so we might have to buy another bus to expand the service and have spares. But I would say, you can see Route 112's ridership. I think that was really a key point that the consultant hit on, that it would need the frequency first. And we might want to keep an eye on 110, and as it further develops up there, it might be something we look at, but we might want to wait until it gets more destinations and origins, right? So,
yeah, no, I appreciate the context, because I think that I've heard a lot of questions from people related to this, like what is the transit solution, and then also like a lot of issues about traffic.
yeah.
Potential for, whatever the traffic situation is gonna be. So I'm glad that it's at least partially in the plan.
Yeah.
And that it's been talked about somewhat, but also just hearing that, it is gonna be budget hits, right? We're gonna need more money to do these things.
Yeah, and in the internal circulation, I think it's been kicked around that the possible bid, TIF, whatever, could pay for, probably the bid side could pay for that internal circulation, or city could, that's still up in the air, but there was a point made that there might be needing some of that internal circulation.
Yeah, I would say that the bid should pay the cost of that, but because I just don't know even, with transit, like how much money, how much the sales tax is gonna increase over,
Sure.
the time period, right? Is it gonna still be enough to, cover transit the way that we're doing? And I know that you do a great job of finding grants and, bringing in those federal match dollars and stuff for like the new buses and, all of that kind of stuff, but it's just a concern as we think about that area.
There's often not additional operations money out there. It's hard to come by those. It's usually the capital on side.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, that the University of North Park area is a 2-mile stretch of space, and is not particularly what I would describe as walkable. So, the ability to get people from the southern end at Robinson to the northern end at Tecumseh without them all having to drive, because I agree with Councilman Schuler that probably the biggest complaint I see about the UNP area is the existing traffic, and it's not even halfway developed out.
Right.
And there are no plans to widen 24th Avenue to 6 lanes for those that are wondering, and the cost to do so would be astronomical. So, and it would make the area even less walkable than it already is. And I don't particularly want to see a highway through there. So that's not there. There is no current proposed interchange at Rock Creek Road. There's no current update to the bridge and interchange at Tecumseh Road and I-35. Maybe in some long-range plans, but I've seen no actual funded project. And so it's vitally important that that area have some sort of way to move a lot of people. And there's tons of parking up there too already. So anyway, that is a important piece that we need to think about, whether it's the city doing it or a bid or that's paying for it, and what even is it.
Right.
So I think that's important. And then another piece of that will tie into our next discussion too. So, okay. And again, with the on-demand, like we said, the budget for that the choice we have is we could have more frequent fixed route service. We could add more routes with the budget we're using for microtransit. So both are good, both have a purpose, but I think it's important that residents and riders understand that that's kind of the choice we have right now, is it's one or the other. We ideally would like to have it all, but if we want the microtransit, we might not be able to do the 30-minute service as fast as we'd like, or expand routes as much as we would want. So I appreciate the update as always, Taylor, and if there's no final comment or question from council, we'll move on.
And I'll follow up on the amount on the amendment for microtransit with finance, and then also the East Side Library. I'll try to.
And I would say about that, at least in my mind, I wouldn't envision something going there every hour, like maybe
To the
2 or
East
3
Side
times a day, or maybe twice a day. I don't know,
Right.
but something. Yeah, it wouldn't be every hour. Maybe once every 3 or 4 hours while it's open. I don't know, something like
Maybe
that.
once in the morning and then once in the afternoon. So yeah.
And then at the end when it closes, something like
Yeah.
that. So
Okay. Well,
okay.
we'll try to flesh that out some more, and see what, again, hopefully the library is getting some feedback on that, or maybe
Yeah.
they're getting calls about how they can reach their other branches, and we can build off of that.
So if you're a rider and you're listening and you want to get to the East Side Library, let us know and we'll see what we can do.
I'll
Okay.
defer to Marion then.
All right,
for the
thank you,
next one.
Taylor. Okay, so our next item on the agenda is a iPad. I thought I plugged it in, but I guess not, it's dead. So our next item on the agenda is a update discussion about the Regional Transit Authority, something that's been in the works for 2 decades around as far as I recall. And the purpose of this is to have interconnected, not just rail-based transit service, but other modes of transportation connecting the Oklahoma City metro area, which is not uncommon. And as the mayor of Oklahoma City says, big league cities and metro areas have, metro area-wide interconnected public transit systems. Many of them have commuter rail or light rail or some sort of rail-based transit. And so this is something that's been in the works for years. Currently between a partnership between the city of Norman, Oklahoma City, and the city of Edmond. And so there is a board that is made up of representatives of each city, appointed by the city councils. We have Marion Hutchison here as one of the representatives for Norman. Chuck Thompson is our other representative, and he could not be here today. And then former Governor Brad Henry is the chair of the board and is a representative for Oklahoma City. And so it's been a while since we've discussed it. There's a lot of things that have happened. There's a lot of things that may be coming quickly down the road in this regard. Down the track, actually, yes. And we have, I think all 4 of us have been around for this discussion at one point or the other, but I did want to have an update so we can have see what's going on. We've talked about 6 months or so ago, staff updated us on potential property sites for stations and even potentially a maintenance facility that could be located in Norman, which would bring jobs and things like that. So I think we're ready to talk some more about it and see where we're at. So I appreciate
Well,
you being here.
You're welcome, and I appreciate you having me. Always, I represent you. I'm your representative on the RTA board, and so I always like coming here and visiting about this. I've personally been involved in this since 2009. It takes a long time.
On
and
track
it's
pace.
it's quite incredible to watch the progress. You know, this started back in 2011 when Oklahoma City and ACOG had the regional transit dialogues that first brought all the cities together to figure out what we're going to do in the future. And 2017, we had the RTA task force that all the mayors served on, and that was back when Mayor Rosenthal was here. And then we formed the RTA in 2019. The indenture was signed. Previously, there was statutes passed up at the Oklahoma legislature allowing us to do that, you know, and quickly we hired consultants, and first part of that business was looking at the north-south line from Oklahoma City between Edmond and Norman, which had been studied previously, had the most work done on it. And so we initially had the consultant we hired, Kimley Horn, great national transit consulting firm. We went through and redid and updated the studies previously on the north-south line, and finished up with an LPA, locally preferred alternative, on, you know, selecting commuter rail as that mode on that corridor. And since then, we have just been in fast and furious work to negotiate with BNSF, because we can't operate the system unless we have an agreement with them. They have embraced this wholly. They will actually be the contract operator of the system, which is really beneficial because that means they can move the trains around on their tracks. Initially, we thought we might have to buy a piece of right-of-way from them, you know, and maybe put in a single line and run north-south and, you know, try and just make it work. But this is really going to be a game changer. And we are probably just a few months away from having a formal contract, an agreement with BNSF, hopefully, to sign off on. And it's involved a lot of work. They've engineered, their engineers have worked with our engineers to look at the entire layout from south end of Norman all the way to the north end of Edmond. And we're moving along really quickly. So that's the kind of the technical end on what's important, you know, as far as Norman's piece of it. But when you look at it, it's interesting to come in behind your discussion, because holistically, eventually where we're going to be, if you've been to Dallas or Denver or Salt Lake City, the RTA runs the entire system, the bus systems and all that.
Connected.
And eventually, it'll take some time. You know, you have to do this in pieces, but, you know, currently, in a sense, we've started the first regional transit system because now Embark is running the system here and there. And but at some point, and it may not be initially, it may be phased in over time, but probably the end result for most efficiency is that you have a single entity operating all those systems, funded through their funding source, which benefits the cities, because that means you no longer have to worry about pulling all your, you know, the transit funding. It's no longer kind of on you to fund and deal with. It's its own kind of own entity and own source. That'll take a while, but from kind of the big picture, if you kind of look at this map, I think I kind of wanted to talk about this first. So the red line is our north-south commuter rail line, and just want to make one comment on the agenda. It mentioned light rail, and you know, if you're not involved in this every day, or you know, occasionally you kind of hear about it. You know, I hear comments I'm seeing posted heavy rail, light rail, commuter rail, and it is important though when you talk about this to constituents when we get to the point of voting that we're doing a commuter rail line, and it doesn't mean it's just for commuters. That's actually a term of a type of vehicle. And it runs, commuter rail means they are heavier vehicles that run on existing freight track infrastructure. Light rail are not allowed to run in mixed traffic, like the DART trains. They're, you just can't have impacts
They have to
because
build their
the
own
safety
lines,
issues.
yeah.
Right, and those are,
That's
you have to buy your own right of way.
Yeah.
You have to electrify them. You're talking the exponential amount of difference between running commuter rail and light rail is a lot. So it's important to be able to, kind of explain those distinctions. So we are going to do a commuter rail line. And if you look at the blue line out to Tinker Air Force Base, once Kimley Horn finished our work on the LPA for the north-south line, we then went ahead and looked at what are we going to do for the east line to get out to Tinker. And this system planned, to the most part, believe it or not, if you go all the way back to 2006, when ACOG and COPPA first did the fixed guideway study, looks very similar. It wasn't exact, but what you're seeing now is actually very technical detail about how we're going to get there. So we did an LPA, and that initially is selected as a bus rapid transit line, initially, that could convert over time with ridership to light rail. And that will serve Tinker Air Force directly. And so, if you've got one of the largest employers in the state, that, we've got Tinker employees here, if you can take the commuter rail into Oklahoma City to Santa Fe and switch over and, take the other line in there, it's a big benefit. Tinker's been working with the RTA, their base people. They are expanding the base. They have a transportation plan put in place, and they're going to put in a hub for this over on the east side. And they've even talked about moving the fencing on their property to allow us to have a station there. So we've got a line that's proposed out to Tinker.
I would mention too that Midwest City and Dale City and more were originally part of this
Correct.
agreement and partnership. And they did drop out a couple years ago, but Tinker Air Force Base, as its own entity, decided, well,
Right.
Midwest City's not going to be on it. We want to be in it as the base. So
And there's a lot of reasons for that.
yeah,
It's political. There's a lot of different reasons. The fact that they're out actually probably makes it easier for us to get this done with Edmond, Oklahoma City, and Norman. I mean, I think those have been the leaders all along. And what we've seen in the past in other cities is once it's up and running, then they turn around and, Moore will say, the train's going right through Moore. There won't be a station. They're not in. They're all going to be asking, why don't we have a station? So that'll work itself out in the
and
future.
that did happen in DFW. We know
Exactly.
that cities
It
did not
does
want to
happen.
join, and
Yes,
then
it
did
does.
later, and it cost them
Right.
big
No,
bucks.
right.
So,
So the-
and two, I would just mention that I agree with you. I think just for comparison, Norman is larger in population than Moore, Midwest City, and Dell City combined. So,
Right.
And then, of course, Oklahoma City is larger than Norman and Edmond and all the other cities combined. So,
Well, I think the importance of the Midwest City Dell area, if you're going through it, is go ahead and serve it, but it's to get to Tinker. That's what that's all about. And we made a commitment that even though they weren't in, we're still going to Tinker. It's important for the whole Oklahoma City metropolitan area. Then, if you look at the next two, we got a federal grant a couple of years ago to then do studies on a line to the airport and a line to West Oklahoma City. Initially, we were hoping, again, that Yukon Mustang might want to join in. They've kind of not been involved in this all the way back to 2011. They're one of the fastest growing areas in the metro. They still aren't interested at this point. And so when that happened, the commuter rail line that would have run from downtown on the UP line all the way out to Yukon kind of became not really the focus of what we can do right now. I mean, it's not really necessary. So we just passed, well, we're getting ready to vote on, these were just recommended, this was from our meeting just a couple weeks ago. That light blue out west and the orange line down to the airport are the last two studies that Kimley Horn's doing for us, and they've recommended locally preferred alternatives. That will be a BRT line that goes out 10th, out past May, I think, and then turns south and drops to Reno, and then it ends up out at a park and ride at the Kilpatrick, out on Southeast 15th, or can't remember what street that is. And then they've recommended light rail to the airport. And there were a number of public meetings and open houses in the last month. If you're interested in any of those, just to see, it's as a whole system, and eventually when this is all in place, it'll be important to all of us. Right now we're kind of more focused on where we're going to be with the end of our line on the commuter rail line, but you can go to RTA Moves, MOVES.com, and that is Kimley Horn's website that's set up for the RTA just for our studies that are going on. You can look at their presentations, you can look at public comments, and you can see a lot of this documentation about what's transpired with their work. It's all on there. Of course, our website, again, is rtaok.org. And you can go look at, all of our documents, presentations, board meeting things, anything else. It's all on there.
I'm blanking on her name right now because I haven't seen her in a while, but she worked on the Salt Lake City.
Oh, Catherine Holmes.
Catherine, yes.
She is Catherine Holmes came on board. We hired her back when it was just the task force in 2017. She was general counsel for the Utah Transit Authority for almost a decade. She worked at the Metro in Washington, D.C. She's worked on California high-speed rail projects. She's an attorney by schooling and profession, but she's a transit expert, and we couldn't have done all this without her. She has just really it's incredible, her negotiation ability. So
And Salt Lake City is one of the, at least in my knowledge, one of the more notable rail-based transit systems in the country. And as a comparison, again, Oklahoma City is a much larger city than Salt Lake City.
yeah, and I've
They've had-
mentioned that a lot,
They've
that
had transit for decades now.
we are kind of looking at Salt Lake as a model, both from the layout and infrastructure, but also looking at political climate, going to a vote. It's very similar. And they have a commuter rail line that runs from Provo to Ogden through Salt Lake, north-south. They have some light rail lines downtown. They have streetcar. So it's real similar. And I think, if you look at that, you'll, see some really good comparisons from where they were maybe 20 years ago and where Oklahoma City is now. The other lines that are laid out on here, the lime green up northwest is Oklahoma City's new BRT line up Northwest Expressway. And then the purple going northeast and the kind of the other darker purplish blue going southeast, those are the maps for BRT lines that are getting ready to go into construction. So you can see, this is not all going to get built at once, and we're not, when we get ready for the referendum and we determine the bonding capacity necessary for construction and the ask that's going to be needed for, potential referendum initiative sales tax, it's not going to be to build it all at once. We're going to, the purpose is to be very careful, cautious, phase it in, and, try to keep those things as much to a minimum as you can. So we're going to be careful about that. One of the things we did recently, I'm going to talk about the BNSF again. One of the most important things we're doing right now is trying to identify, well, they're pretty much identified, and acquire or have some type of control in the properties we're going to need for our stations. And so there's about 11 or 12 stations between Edmond and Norman. Norman has 3 primary stations that are identified, and we're going to have a special event station. If you haven't heard, BNSF has already agreed, and OU's involved in this. We're going to have an OU station somewhere near Lindsay in the duck pond by the tracks, and BNSF is, they're willing to allow us to run game day trains throughout from north-south for OU games. So I think Councilmember Holman, you mentioned you kind of talked about this previous one of your meetings. We're looking at a station up around Tecumseh
Yeah.
on the tracks, and then also down by Highway 9, as well as a maintenance facility down, I think Cedar Lane on the
Posto.
Posto,
Yeah.
on the south end. And, you know, the maintenance facility is a really great thing for Norman, you know, jobs, and I think that'll be beneficial. Right now, I think the impetus is that the RTA, and I think we all, you know, when I say RTA, I mean, essentially we're all partners in this because we represent you know, it's a partnership effort. We would like to try to figure out how we can have ownership or some contractual obligation and control of these station properties before we go to a vote. And so that's something we're really, you know, working at. And it's a struggle in the fact that land is no longer inexpensive and probably has been for a long time, but it's, most of these are at, you know, these are prime locations. And I think it's important to just understand that your transit system is only going to be as good as your station locations. So, you know, you can save a lot of money and put stations in a lot of places, but if nobody's going to go there and utilize it, it's not going to really do you a whole lot of good.
Councilmember Grant?
I'm kind of wondering, so we're getting 3 dedicated stations. What is the park and ride situation at each of them? Like, do we envision?
So the Highway 9 in Tecumseh would provide considerable park and ride. The downtown Santa Fe Depot is going to be the other station. Whatever we can have as far as, you know, necessary parking down there, it's tight. You know, if there's some kind of way to work with the county on the parking garage.
Structured parking would be the best
Right.
option for that, yes.
In the RTA, they did have a distinction at some point like this. There's a community type station, and then there's a,
Right.
whatever we call it, I don't know if we call it commuter, but more of a
Collector.
collector, thank you. So
Collector.
Tecumseh and Highway 9 are seen as that collector, park and ride lots, you know, drop people off coming in from outside areas. And then that downtown or the Santa Fe or the depot is meant to be that kind of walk up, bike up. Maybe there's more housing options in the area. But if there are any parking opportunities for people that live in that area that don't want to drive to Tecumseh or the Highway 9 station, hopefully we can capitalize on those.
I
So
would say-
there is a distinction too.
They could pick a city lot like Gray Street
Right.
to park all day. I don't know if it's kind of cheap. So.
Yeah, right. So we're definitely looking at that too, but it's meant to be maybe more of that walk-up type urban environment kind of station.
And we are having conversations about a vehicle like Cleveland County Industrial Authority tie up the properties. If the community votes yes, then through that sales tax funding mechanism, that's how the ultimate cost of those pieces of real estate are recuperated. In the event we're able to tie them up, and the last thing we want to do is not tie them up, have somebody come in and start building a building, and now we're buying a building instead of a piece of vacant land, that who might be our, you know, takeout users. Well, a couple of pieces may have some industrial value to them, and NEDC could be the takeout if it doesn't wind up ultimately becoming part of a RTA system. So that's, we think sometime in 2025, we will know the answers to all of these
Yeah, and
things.
so when we started this, and just, I mean, this is important, when we began this in 2019, since the RTA is not, it has no dedicated funding, and the funding we receive is through the requests we make to the cities each annually just to cover our studies and our budgets. We don't have revenue to go out and buy property. And so initially it was, the cities would buy and own the properties at the stations. The RTA would construct and build basically a standardized station. And if the cities wanted to go further and high grade a station for their local branding or whatever, they could do that. But what's happened in the last year or so is it's kind of realized that these property prices and what the costs are going to be, it's going to be very difficult for the cities to come up with that. And so we passed a resolution at the last board meeting confirming that the RTA is going to own the properties if the referendum passes, and we will be buying these back if the cities or, you know, whoever is able to, provide the funding to acquire them initially, we will be buying those properties back. So it's our intention now, and I think it really is probably going to be the best way to work it out, is that we will own the property and the stations, and that we're just needing to figure out how we can get those properties controlled until we get past the referendum vote. And along your other question, so we can talk about like Highway 9 and Tecumseh being parking rides, but the fact of the matter is, because of where those are located and the size of some of these parcels and things around there, those will, if this is successful, those will end up becoming transit-oriented development areas with large apartments, mixed-use development, and so it will still have a parking lot for park and ride, but it will also become a community station once you get the development that always occurs around these out there, and those areas are both set up for that. So I think that's really important, for city housing needs and everything.
And they're both in the fastest growing areas of Norman.
Right.
Southeast at Highway 9 and Highway 77, and then that North Tecumseh, northeast area. So, yeah, I foresee that being very attractive for transit-oriented development. And especially the south side, I see, just because there's all these small towns and other places south and east of Norman, and taking Highway 9 to I-35 and I-35 to downtown Oklahoma City is a long way, and the turnpike's not going to shorten your way to Oklahoma City from southeast Norman. It may get some trucks off I-35, but in my experience, the trucks are not what's causing the traffic on I-35.
Well, and we've also got a vehicle review committee now. That's the next thing we have to decide is what vehicle we're going to run, and I'm on that. And Chuck Thompson is also, Director Thompson. We went down took a trip to Fort Worth. We took the Heartland Flyer to Fort Worth Station, and then we got off at the station and took the Trinity Rail Express, which is an old commuter rail line that runs from Fort Worth Station to Dallas Union Station.
Through DFW.
And so that's a commuter rail train. And then from there, we took their light rail back out to DFW, and then took the new Tex Rail, which is a more modern, newer DMU commuter rail line that runs back to Fort Worth. On the way, we stopped in Grapevine. And I mean, I was just like blown away by the TOD development in Grapevine around the station. Big hotel, this big building that almost looked like Denver Union Station. We went inside, it had lunch, and it was full of people, and it was like shops and
Multi-family housing under construction all the way around the station stuff. There were 1,000 housing units getting built to be within walking distance.
And this is really a new thing for Oklahoma. I mean, we have not had rail transit since the last trolley ran, other than the new streetcar. And so TOD is not just a common word that developers and people in Oklahoma even really know about. And once this gets going, it's the opportunities are phenomenal for the cities and for just the overall metro to share. One last thing one thing we talk about real quick. So the new arena vote passed, and they've announced that new arena is going into the Cox Center. The Cox Center is right across from Santa Fe Station, and they're already planning and talking about how we're going to. Right now, if you've been to Santa Fe Station, Oklahoma City, out front, all you see across the street is just this big wall of the Cox Center. It's not very conducive to your hub for your system. That's all going to be integrated in to provide for future light rail, some space, open space on that side, and so it's really exciting to think about what this map's very simple, but we're moving really far along on the future of transportation in Oklahoma City, and it'll be a really exciting time as these things start to develop.
Councilman Grant.
Okay, so park and ride is an option. I assume since this is regional transit, also the buses could go to the stations, thus reducing the need for parking. And
They really have to. Like for the rail thing to be a real transit thing, they have to.
One of the first, what's going to happen if this passes, and just with the first line, the bus system is going to, and we're talking about but Edmond, Norman, the whole area, you know, including what Edmond currently isn't using Embark. The bus system expansion is going to have to, it'll be one of the first things that happens, because now you've got to have buses arriving at the station on time when those trains arrive, rush hour, and then, so your system, all your systems that are set up now, even the streetcar in Oklahoma City, it wasn't really built just to circulate people that live down there. That was built as like the first step so that when the commuter rail is running, if I'm going to go to work and I'm going to ride commuter rail, when I get there, I need to get onto something that I want to call Uber that'll get me around downtown. That's in place. So what's going to happen once this line is up and running is you're going to have lots of people coming in to Norman and vice versa, and they're going to fill your systems, and your systems are, so it's going to expand rapidly. Transit is going to get much bigger, and you're going to have a lot more users. And so that's why earlier when I said it's almost that you have to bring it all under one umbrella. And more than likely, one of the things we have to look at when we go to a referendum vote, we can't just think about what is the need to bond out just to build this commuter rail line. We have to think about paying the additional bus infrastructure, because it's going to have to be there to support it. And so probably, I mean, it just makes more sense to me, Mr. City Manager, you understand this, that in the big picture, it's probably would be best if that amount, whatever you get, is able to fund the operation of the whole system and take it off your shoulders, you know. And
And the ability to ensure connectivity and a seamless experience is mission critical for those
Right.
return customers. And Marion probably won't take credit, but a thing that this RTA board has been able to do in negotiating the relationship with BNSF to be the operator, in that relationship, it states that BNSF would operate this system and provide priority to the commuter rail above freight.
during operating hours.
And
our
that
oper-
is a milestone that can really provide you with reliable, you know exactly when the train's gonna be there. They'll stop freight to allow that commuter train to take priority and make it on time. The other thing that's really adding value, and you know, it takes years for these things to come together, but now what's coming together is a federal investment in Amtrak, which is also on the BNSF alignment, and the amount of double tracking that the federal government will pay for. Every dollar they spend to improve Amtrak is a dollar our taxpayers won't have to spend, but our commuter rail will ride on that exact same set of double tracks. This stars are lining up.
They are.
More by luck than design, but we'll take the luck.
Yeah, at
anytime
the
we get
federal
it.
level, the FTA and Amtrak and everybody, we're in a very unusual situation where the I-35 corridor from, you know, Dallas all the way up to Chicago, it's one of the heaviest freight corridors in the country. They understand the need to improve and expand the freight. They also are really behind expanding Amtrak up to Kansas to reconnect that. And then that overlays with the RTA. I mean, it sets us up to be in a really good position to receive federal funding. They're looking at it real positively.
I'm glad we're on funding, because that was what I was gonna wrap up with. So as I understand it, our transportation tax would evaporate if passed, and then we would join the system, and the money we were spending on that would kind of just roll into the RTA.
Yeah, it was contingent, our 8% was contingent upon the recognition that if the RTA system takes over transit, our 1/8% disappears, and it's covered by the systems-wide new tax.
So, since I was a part of that, putting that together, the intent was, yes, that and not just an RTA being approved for rail, it had to be bus service. So if a regional solution to operate and fund bus, the existing service we already provide, was approved at some point in the future, that voter-approved tax would go away and the new tax would take over. And if RTA, the thinking was too, is if the RTA proposal was the same rate than as our existing tax, the RTA vote in Norman would not be a tax increase. So it'd just be replacing an existing tax with another tax that's the exact same. It may be end up being more than what our current is, but that was kind of the intent in 2019 was we could
Well,
end
and
up in a
that, we're at
situation
that,
where we don't
we're
ask
at
for
that
tax
point
increase.
now, and I visited with City Manager Pyle, and he's visiting with the city managers in the other cities that are involved, because that is a discussion that they are trying to figure out is what do we roll into it? When do we that's kind of beyond our expertise. It's a decision that needs to be made between the cities about incorporating, when do we do it and how do we do it?
So, when the state of Oklahoma, the legislature said we're gonna reduce sales tax on groceries, they also put in a caveat that said nobody gets to ask for a sales tax increase between now and July of '25.
Right.
Or if the tax passes, it will not be applied against groceries, which is about half of the value of the tax. The city of Edmond engaged with a lobbyist to go meet with the state legislature to say, this isn't kind of what you're thinking of, and we'd like a carve out. So if the RTA question needs to go before July of '25, that it would not be excluded from being applied against groceries. And the state legislature agreed. So now we have a much broader calendar of election dates. 2025 has more dates available than 2024 had. So Oklahoma City is looking at what it envisions questions they need to ask. Edmond has some questions it needs to ask. So they just want to be, they just don't want to be asking for multiple tax questions for any of the jurisdictions all on the same ballot. So
And
we're working on
generally,
that date.
we're just generally saying possible to go to a referendum vote in the next 12 to 15 months. So, 2025, spring, summer 2025, and that's fast. I mean, there's a lot to do, and so.
It's a
I'll-
pass or fail. Norman's
Yes,
just
and-
OKC.
And this isn't a district, so we don't do it city by city. The way the RTA is set up through the statutes and our help me on our indenture for the RTA is, it would be a district-wide vote. So we're all voting. Edmond is one. That's how that vote will take place. So in light of that, we're working hard on these technical issues. Just like the city of Norman, you guys can't go out and, sponsor and promote and market your campaigns. We can't either. So this will be something led by the Oklahoma City Chamber, more than likely, with assistance from the Norman and Edmond chambers. The chambers will get behind, and that will involve polling, marketing, and a campaign. And, we'll all have, some input and try to help them with, give them some ideas and things. But that's going to be who's going to try to lead the charge on this. So the last kind of thing we're doing right now is part of the BNSF discussion, and whatever you all are determining on inclusion of bus or whatever we do, we're trying to finalize infrastructure costs with BNSF, and once that's done, because we're having to provide, they're just not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're going to get a lot of infrastructure improvements to make their system efficient to allow us to run in there, and they can still run their freight. So it's a win-win. It benefits them, benefits us. Once we know that number, then the consultants can go back and back calculate minimum bonding requirements to achieve phased in, and then we will find out, I would think in the next few months, what that ask number is going to be. We'll know that fairly soon.
Did you have any follow-ups on that one, Councilman?
No, I was just gonna say, I guess, when the bus system if and when the bus system moves to regional transit, then that's Embark, and the discussion of fares falls on them.
It'll probably
won't
be
be
a
setting
uniform
that.
fare, for everyone.
Yeah, and so real quick, the last thing I'll say, the difficulty right now in that Embark is under COTPA, Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. That is a city trust. Okay, so the RTA is a regional 40 representing all the cities.